We've been in a series that Kurt's titled The Greatest Stories Ever Told. And it's a series that looks at the parables of Jesus. Jesus was just a great storyteller. His ministry relied heavily on parables. There are 35 parables in the New Testament that are recorded. It says in one place in the book of Mark, he didn't say anything to them without using a parable. Today I'm going to look at the parable of the Prodigal Son. I want to just tell you, warning ahead of time, this is not a fill-in-the-blank message like I usually do. This is a more from-the-heart message. I want to set it up. 36 years ago, Silver Creek Fellowship began. And from that day until now, we've been on a mission to help people find their way back to God. Some people who have come to Silver Creek Fellowship found their way back to God for the very first time. For others, people found their way back to a closer relationship to God. And yet, for others, it was after a season of straying away, they were coming back to God. Some people had pretty instant and dramatic journeys back to God. For others, it was a journey that involved a process of many months, even many years. And over the years, hundreds of people have found their way back to God. In fact, many of them were you. This morning, I'd like you to hear two of our stories.
My name is Justin Thomas Officer. I'm from this area, Silverton, Prattham area. Went to Silverton High School. Ever since I could remember, when my mom was a single mom, she always took us to church. There was a time when I didn't really question my faith at all. I believed God was good and things were really simple. But, as I went to high school and ran across people with different ideas, and I had my own ideas, I guess I stopped trusting God and I started trusting myself more as far as what I thought was right. And that kind of started my progression into self-reliance, which I never was very reliable, I guess. For a couple of years, I was kind of floundering. I went to Willamette University for a semester. I dropped out after a semester, and then I was just kind of working odd jobs in Salem and kind of just living on my own. And about 4 years in to that, I decided I wanted to go back to college. I thought philosophy was a good way to find the capital T truth. I wasn't looking for it in the Bible anymore, and I quickly found out that none of the philosophers that we read knew anything. And that was really disappointing. The, drug culture and the partying culture really started to appeal to me there, so I kind of got wrapped up in that. Got kicked out of school for selling drugs once, and then I got back in. And then things were really terrible in Santa Fe, and they had another campus in Annapolis, Maryland. So I transferred there, and then I fell in with a crowd in town there that did harder drugs, and got to the point where I couldn't think or write a sentence. And I was almost finished the first semester of my senior year when I realized I couldn't complete school, so I called my mom and got a plane ticket home. I brought all my problems home with me, and I couldn't live by the rules of my mom's house, and she decided to show me some tough love and took me to the Union Gospel Mission in Salem. I spent about 3 years on and off living homeless. So there's many attempts to get sober, but I never really fully committed my life back to Jesus or realized that he was the only way I was going to get out of that terrible place. I was living in Bend in a tent with somebody, just doing whatever drugs I could get a hold of. And things started to get pretty bad there. And so I got a ride home to Salem, and I stayed with a friend. And after a couple of months of staying with him, I remember smoking some marijuana I just had this thought of my mom being on her deathbed when I was like maybe 50 or 60, and me not having like changed or progressed at all. And that thought horrified me. I really asked God for help, and I gave up the weed and started the long process of recovery. At first, when I was coming to Celebrate Recovery, I didn't really believe it or appreciate it. I knew that I needed God's help, but there was a lot of truths that were being said in Celebrate Recovery that really kind of directly opposed some of my deeply ingrained beliefs. I mean, I guess I would attribute it to the Lord more than to myself, the fact that I showed up week after week after week. I know that my primary desire was to stay sober and to recover my life. I mean, I can't even tell you what my worst moment was. There were so many of them. There were just such dark times where I was high or in a psychosis. And even in those moments, I remember, God's presence showing up, even in just the darkest places. The hopelessness of being on the street and thinking that you'll never live in a house again, you'll never have a job again, you'll never, there's just so many walls that you believe are there. Fast forward to today, I, with one slip up, have a little over 3 years sober. I have a job with the city now. I'm contributing to my community, helping others as much as I can, just trying to do the next right thing.
Well, hello, my name is Carissa. I'm married to Mike. He's the red bearded man that usually sits next to me in church. We moved to Oregon about 4 years ago from Pennsylvania. Been coming to the church for about 2 years now, and I'm a dental assistant. My husband's a timber faller. We full-time RV in Oregon, and yeah, that's pretty much us. My relationship with the Lord in childhood kind of stemmed from my mom and dad. I'm one of 4 girls, and mom and dad were always believers. When we were very little, they would take us to church. Dad would kind of substitute preach every now and again at a local church. I was very involved in a youth group. I'd go Sunday nights and Wednesday nights like clockwork. I was all about it. I had the time of my life, going on all sorts of retreats. But all that to say, I don't know that I really had my own relationship with the Lord. And then as the years went on, later years, like in high school, things like that, I definitely did not go to church as much as I should have. Definitely stopped going to youth group stuff, and kind of was more into like social status. In high school, it was more or less like young, wild, and free. It was kind of like this innocence playing, whereas as time went on, it got to be like heavy. It got to be more or less of this genuine play to, this is starting to become who I am. My boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, we sold my house and we bought a 5th wheel. Now, during that time, on the outside looking in, most people would say that that's like a really exciting move, all this great stuff. But to be honest with you, even though I had Mike, who I love very much, I was a very broken person. We took the journey, made it to Oregon. And of course, this was now in the thick of it, of COVID and stuff. So things were not open up out here. We didn't have really good connections. It was dark for me because I didn't have a support group. I didn't have friends, places to go, community, fellowship, nothing like that. I just had me and Mike. During that time, my parents and I kind of had a falling out. Hindsight's 2020. I realized that I was letting the devil just rule my life and pull me to isolation. I was just randomly scrolling on my phone, home alone, scrolling on my phone on YouTube. and I stumbled upon several videos that were like talking about spiritual warfare. So it was heavy, not the kind of stuff you want to look at before bed. But all I know is that's what changed me, is I became literally debilitated with like fear and anxiety. So the first thing I did was call Mike, and God bless him, because he's not supposed to have all the answers, and I found that out the hard way. And I wasn't getting the peace that I was so desiring. The next thing I thought to do was call my sister Christine. She walked away from the Lord herself, and she was like, "Krista, I don't know what I believe in." And then I just instantaneously had to hang up, and I just remember total quiet in where I was, and I put the phone down between my legs, and I just said, "Okay, God, I know that you are here, and I need your peace in this moment." And I don't remember all of my verbiage, to be honest with you, but what I remember that I just wish that I could pass to anyone that I would ever meet is that true, serene peace. And that's probably why I can't explain it, because it does surpass all understanding. But I could feel it. Everything changed from that moment on. I truly understood in that moment what being born again was. And I was new. I was something entirely new. I have talked to my mom now for the past 2 years, every single day. And we've healed our relationship. To hear your mom say that she has hope for the rest of our family and other people that she's meeting, because I've come home. I'm involved in a church, and I have family in a church, and my mom now, like I said, we talk every day, and she's like so thrilled, so excited. And yeah, so like God really did change my life, and he continues to do that every single day. It's not always like easy. I'm still stubborn. I'm still irritable sometimes. I'm still impatient and all these things, but without a doubt, I know that God is alive and well, and he is for me, and he is using me. I really want every mom or dad who has a kid who's like, man, their kid's just like, my kid's just out there, whatever. I want them to have hope that they can come back. I want the kids to have a wake-up call, so to speak, and know that life is so much more grand than you could ever imagine, like with God and with him every day.
Well, as we push pause for a moment on their stories, I want to ask you about your story. Have you ever felt like Justin or Carissa? I mean, your story is likely to be different than theirs. It might be more dramatic or less dramatic, but I'm sure there were times that you felt similar things. Many of you know what it's like to end up in a place in life that you never intended to be. Maybe you're not even sure how you got there or how you got here. Many of you know what it's like to have longings that have gone unfulfilled in your life. Most of us have had times in our life where we've thought, there's got to be more to life than this. Deep within each of us are longings that are universal, and they show up in almost everything that we do. They show up in the stories that we tell. They show up even in the songs that we sing. Let me prove a point to you. You got to help me out on this. I'm going to give you the line from a few songs, and then I want you to help me finish them. So, are you ready? Okay, Mick Jagger said, "You can't always get what you want." U2 and Bono said, "But I still haven't found what I'm looking for." Country singer Johnny Lee said, "I've been looking for love all the wrong places." Those songs have language that describe longings that we all have. We all are looking and we all are longing. I read about a guy named Glenn Wolfe. Glenn lived in California, and he holds the record for the most monogamous marriages in the United States. Glenn was married 29 times. His longest marriage lasted 7 years, and his shortest was 19 days. Here's an interesting thing about Glenn. He was an ordained Baptist minister. He was a Baptist minister, and he was married 29 times. But sadly, Glenn died in a nursing home at the age of 88, and his body went unclaimed. None of the women he was married to and none of his 19 children attended his funeral service. Now, as crazy as that is, the thing I wondered about Glenn, why didn't he stop? After the 4th attempt or after the 24th attempt, why did he keep trying? Because I think most of us keep trying, even when we go through setbacks and failure. This thing is ringing. I don't know what it is, but it's really bugging me. After all, in the area of relationships, we often get dumped. We often get hurt. Kurt's been our tech guy today. So he's going to sing, he's going to lead, he's going to do the announcements, he's going to do the tech. He's doing an awesome job. I think the reason Glenn kept going is because deep inside each of us, there's a longing to be loved. And not only that, we have a longing for purpose. I mean, think back to when you were a kid. Some of you, I know that was a long way back. But think about maybe when you were 5 years old or 6 years old. What did you want to be when you grew up? Help me out. What did you want to be? A scientist, a doctor, a teacher, an astronaut, a fireman. I wanted to be a rock star. I kind of think I still do. But let me just ask you a question. Why in the world, when you were only 5 years old or 6 years old, why were you dreaming about being anything? I mean, you didn't need a job. You didn't have any bills to pay. Why were you didn't even know the alphabet yet. You were just learning how to write your name. Why would you even be thinking about what did you want to be when you grew up? Because I think the answer is deep inside every one of us is a desire for purpose. You want to be something. You want to do something. You want to accomplish something for this world. We have a longing for love. We have a longing for purpose. We have a longing to discover the why questions of life. So I think many of us have gone through times where we're asking why. Why am I in so much pain? If God is good, why did He allow this to happen to me? Why am I here? What's the purpose of it all? These why questions are very common for us. And we go through times of suffering, we go through times of difficulty or discouragement, and it often causes us to question God. God, why? What's going on here? And one of the things I want to tell you is the reason why suffering feels not just painful is because it feels like something's wrong, something's unfair. And the reason that you feel like your life and the world isn't going the way it's supposed to be is because God has put those feelings in you. God gave you these feelings. There's something in you that God desires for you to have. But here's the good news. Awakening to those longings, those whys, the what's up questions, is the beginning of being on your way back towards God. Today I want to look at one of the most famous stories that Jesus ever told, the story of the prodigal son. It's found in Luke chapter 15. It says in verse 11, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land where he wasted all his money in wild living. The prodigal son is a story of a lost son who has longings. I mean, I can just actually hear him singing. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. There's got to be more. In the context of the first century Middle Eastern culture, a son asking for an early inheritance was one of the worst insults a father could ever receive. A son in Jesus' day was expected to wait until his father died before he received his inheritance. Not only that, a son was expected to help take care of his father in his old age. And just like Kurt came to take care of me just a few minutes ago. That's what a son's supposed to do till dad dies. But the son asking for an early inheritance is just the same as saying, look, Dad, I don't care whether you live or die anymore. I just know there's something more and I want it now. You ever seen those J.G. Wentworth commercials on television where it says, it's my money and I want it now? Well, that's what this son did, but it was a huge offense. Before we rush to judgment about this ungrateful son, I think it's possible that he's just saying out loud what many of us feel. Sometimes we feel like life isn't bringing us what we deserve or what we wanted or what we had hoped for. We all have those kind of feelings. I think the son in Jesus' story is like many of us. He was convinced that he had to leave home to find the answers and to fulfill the longings. So Jesus, in his story, says he set off for a distant country. The story doesn't give us many details about what actually occurred in the distant country. It simply says the younger son squandered his wealth in wild living. I guess it's up to us to imagine what wild living looked like. If the story took place today, the son probably would have taken off for some exotic place. Hollywood, Las Vegas, Scottsdale, someplace like that. It's not hard to imagine that his journey included parties into all hours of the night, binge drinking, drugs, hanging out with women who were willing to fulfill every desire. And it didn't take very long for the son to blow his inheritance. His adventure turned sour in a hurry. It was a problem because a famine struck and he had no money or food. Listen to the story, verse 14. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his field to feed pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. His longing for love wasn't satisfied in partying or in drugs or in women. In fact, those things left him empty. He was asking the why questions. Why didn't this turn out like I thought it would? Why am I so lonely? Why am I so broke? Why am I so hungry? Why did I end up in this place? Does any of that sound familiar? It should, because the prodigal son is actually a story all of us should relate to. Some of our journeys away from God and back towards God are more painful, some are less. But each one of us has a story. It's not just Justin or Carissa who has stories to tell. Every one of us has a story. So what I want to do with this message is bring this to what I think is one of life's most important questions. Not how will you end up away from God? What I want to ask you is, where will you go to satisfy the longings that you have in your life? Where will you go? Where will you turn? What is it that will either draw you closer to God or take you further away? So let's look a little bit more at the story, verse 17. When he finally came to his senses, say that with me, came to his senses. This is the key. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I'll go home to my father and say, Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you. I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he returned home to the father. So the first step in finding your way back begins with what the prodigal son did. He came to his senses. Came to his senses is an idiom. The Cambridge Dictionary of Idioms says it means he started to understand that he had been behaving in a stupid way. That's what it takes. What am I doing? How could I be so stupid? So after being foolish and wrong, he came to his senses and he started thinking in a sensible way. You know, the Bible says this in Proverbs 20, verse 30. Sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways. Can you say amen to that? Sometimes it just takes difficulty, trouble. And that's what it took for the prodigal son. It took no food, no money to turn him back towards his father. What will it take for you? How many of you have ever blown it so bad that you've had to apologize in a big way? If you've ever had to do that, then you actually know what this boy's doing on his walk home. Because remember, he went to a distant country. So he's got a long walk home. And during that time, I think what he's doing, he's rehearsing this whole thing in his mind. I'm going back to Dad. When I get there, I'm going to tell him, I'm no longer worthy to be your son, But this is the part that blows my mind. It says in verse 20, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. So here's the son. He's been rehearsing this. He's got this long apology he's going to get. So the son starts the apology. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But Dad won't have any of that. He cuts him off in mid-sentence. He's got a polished message he's been working on to tell Dad, hire me back as your son. Dad says, no, I'm not going to have that. It says in verse 22, but his father said to the servants, right in mid-sentence, he cuts him off. Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his fingers and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and now has returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So let the party begin. Hey, servants, we're eating big tonight. We're throwing a party. Get a robe. Put a ring on his finger. Get sandals. Kill the best calf we've got. My son is home. Now, as Jesus is telling this story, he's painting a picture of what God is like. And in this story, the father represents God, and the prodigal son represents you and me. And the picture that Jesus is showing us is the Father wants to take you back just as you are. See, I met a lot of people who say, I know I need God, but before I can come back to Him, I got to stop doing this, start doing this. Before I come back to God, I got to clean up my act. I got to get it all together. I mean, that's what the son said. He said, I've sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer to be worthy to be called your son. I got to clean up my act. I'm no longer worthy. I wonder if that's how you feel. If you're sitting here today thinking, I'm no longer worthy. I'm not worthy of God's forgiveness. I'm not worthy of God's healing. I'm not worthy of God's love. If that's what you're thinking, well, then you're absolutely right. You're not. And neither am I. And that's what's amazing about God's love and grace. He pours out His extreme love on us so that we can experience forgiveness and healing that will set us on a new path. I've talked to a lot of people that says this forgiveness thing, I know, Rob, for you, you're kind of a goody two-shoes preacher. But actually, a lot of people feel like they can't relate. See, friends, God wants you to know this. He loves you right like you are, right where you're at. Let me ask you a question. When do you clean a fish? Do you clean a fish before you catch it or after? You catch the fish first, then you clean it. You bring it home in the boat, and then you clean it. The son came home. The father didn't say, get cleaned up first. No, what did the father say first? No, get him a robe. Get him some shoes. Put the ring on his finger. We'll clean him up later. But the Father accepts him now. Friends, God wants you to know that He accepts you right now just the way you are. And He's calling you today to come home. Justin heard God's call to come home. It was an odd call. He was smoking a joint. And he heard God call him home. Carissa heard God's voice. She was in a YouTube video of all places. God said, come home. And God's calling you to come home.